and I'm going to go over some of the requirements for a person who wishes to move, work, and study in Australia. If you have any questions during this consultation, I mean, there's a lot of people, we've received a lot of emails. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them. But as some of you saw, if it's a very specific question, I might need to speak to you individually to understand what your individual circumstances are. So, for example, for some people who have studied in the UK, or they've done their masters in the UK or Canada or another Western country, it might be easier to obtain a permanent residency. Nevertheless, I'm going to share my screen with you. So the first thing is, we have skilled visa processing priorities. This is a website from the Australian government. The reason I'm showing you this is because I want to show you that the health and welfare and health professionals are a sought after cohort of visa applicants. So if you are in a medical sphere, whether you're a doctor, just a general practitioner, a specialized doctor, a nurse, some other medical professions, you may have a very good opportunity to obtain a permanent visa to Australia, as long as you meet all the registry requirements and the skills assessment requirements. Now, we have other websites where you can check how much a particular profession is sought after in Australia. So this is nationalskillscommission.gov.au. From this website, you will be able to see if your particular specialty is in demand and what the demand for that particular profession is. First thing that we do, we look at the different visa types that exist. And based on the visa types, we look at different types of medical professions. So we've had a look at a cardiologist. But if we look at the specialties here, the different professions, medical oncologist, all these professions, medical professions, are being assessed by this medical organization. So your first step would be to check if your profession is on this list that we're looking at over here, right? Now, this list was created in 2019, just before the COVID pandemic started. And it may change on 1st of July, but the concept would remain the same. Medical professions are in big demand in Australia. There's a big demand for doctors, nurses, and nurse support staff. So if you're a doctor, you have a very good chance of eventually getting a permanent visa, as long as your profession is recognized in Australia, as long as your experience is recognized in Australia. Recognition for most medical professions are done by this organization here. It's slightly different for nurses. And for some of you who are not able to get your skills assessment as a doctor, you also might be willing to and able to apply for a skills assessment for a lower profession. And if you obtain this skills assessment, you can still come to Australia on a work or a permanent visa, and then work towards getting your skills recognized, whether that will be through extra study, more study or assessments or exams, and then get your registration as a doctor. So if your number one preference goal is to obtain an Australian permanent visa, you might want to consider different pathways, not necessarily just a direct entry with your particular profession. Okay. Now, if you have a little search, I'll show you how this works. You do a Google search over here, and it says Medical Board of Australia. So those are the people that will be recognizing your skills and experience for the purposes of applying for a visa. This is just going to be a general overview. So it's a lot more complicated than that, but I'm just giving you a general overview. So assessment pathway for registration for international medical graduates. So this website here provides you information about what are the different options and what are the requirements and what are the pathways for you to obtain a skills assessment. And you need a skills assessment so that you can apply for a visa afterwards. Now, in terms of different visa types, if you manage to get a employer and or an employer plus your skills assessed and recognized, you may be eligible to get a 186 visa directly. So these are direct permanent visa, as long, depending on your experience, depending on your qualifications. Now, in terms of eligibility, the reason I'm talking about skills assessments is that you need to have occupation from the list. And as long as you have an occupation from this list here, which we're looking at, you meet the first criteria for this visa. Work experience would also be determined by the skilling organization. And that's this requirement here. You need to have a positive skills assessment. So this organization that we just looked at over here would need to assess you as meeting the requirements to be a doctor in Australia if you're a doctor. If you're another medical professional, maybe it's a different organization. So it depends on your particular profession. You also need to have a registration in Australia. Am I eligible to work in Australia? This is from the Australian Health Department, health.gov.au. So you have two sets of criteria. You need to have your skills assessed and you need to be eligible to work in Australia. Both of those requirements are needed for some of the visas that you can apply for. This includes information about recognized degrees, job offers, skills assessments, English proficiency. Now, for English proficiency, most of the requirements are academic IELTS 7. So for you to work as a doctor at the moment, to obtain a skills assessment. So for most of the professions, for the medical professions, you're required to have IELTS 7 in academic. So this information is over here in this site. In addition to these initial requirements, there's other steps you need to follow for the visas. And the visas are quite complicated. I had a question at the beginning asking me what can I do? How can I come to work in Australia? What visas can I apply for? This is quite complex because there are many different types of visas. So these are just some of them. So 186 is a permanent visa. 189 is also a permanent visa. So if you meet all the requirements, especially for people who have studied either a bachelor degree or have done specialization in a Western country, in United Kingdom or Ireland or Canada, if you have specialization in one of those countries, you might be able to get your skills assessment easier than if you have studied just in Uzbekistan. If you study just in Uzbekistan, the chances are that you need to study a little bit more in Australia. But if you've studied in a Western country, especially English-speaking country, you may be eligible for those visas here, 189 or 190, which are quicker and usually easier, especially if you're a doctor. It will be much easier to obtain this visa than to obtain the 186, because 186, you need to have a job. For the 190 and the 189, you do not need a job. You can apply for the visa, get your visa even before you come to Australia. So this could be beneficial for some people, sorry. You may also be eligible to get a work visa. If you find a sponsor, an employer, you may be eligible to get a work visa. Work in Australia, and while you're working in Australia, you can still continue to get your skills recognized and get your skills assessed and get your registration and then move on to a different visa. So you don't have to stick to one visa. You can jump from one visa to another visa in order for you to be able to get permanent visa at the end. So this is a permanent visa. This is a permanent visa. This is a permanent visa. And they haven't included it, but this is provisional. From this one, you can go to another visa, which is 191. This is also a permanent visa, right? Now, those permanent visas have different requirements and different criteria. And this is why it's very difficult for me to answer individual questions today, because I don't know what your particular situation is. I'm not sure what you have studied. I'm not sure what you have studied. I'm not sure how much work experience you have. I'm not sure how good your English is. All of those things put together would impact what is the pathway that you can take. But again, if you focus initially on getting your skills assessed, improving your English, getting your skills assessed, and then getting a registration in Australia, you have already met the most difficult part of coming to work in Australia, of coming to live in Australia. Because as I said, for doctors, there are many available jobs, and there's a very big demand in Australia, very big demand. Okay. So overall, once you have your skills, getting a visa is not difficult for a doctor. Okay. Now, if for whatever reason you're not able to meet the requirements for the skills assessment, or you're not able to find an employer initially, there is another potential pathway for you. So if you don't have either you don't have the English level requirements, or you don't have the skills assessments, or you don't have the registration, there could be another pathway. However, you will be facing you'll be getting a lower wage. So because of the shortage in let me just write. Because of the shortage of healthcare workers in Australia, the Australian government created a special pathway for people who are working at a much lower level than a doctor, much lower level. So if a person is a support worker, even if it's a nurse support worker, even if you're really interested in coming to Australia, and you're willing to do anything to come to Australia and eventually work as a doctor, you can use a different pathway. You can apply to get your skills recognized at a much lower level than a doctor. It's a lower level than a nurse. It's a nurse support worker. If you get your skills recognized in Australia as a nurse support worker and you have a job, you are able to get a 2-year work visa or a 4-year work visa. And after those first 2 years, you can go and apply for a permanent visa using this pathway. The benefit of this pathway is that there's so much demand that it's very easy to find a job. The level of education is much lower than a doctor. It's between 6 to 12 months. Even if you have 12 months of work experience, that is sufficient. So if you can have a look at this here. English language requirements, 5 on IELTS, much lower than a doctor, right? So the requirements for this pathway are much, much lower. And if you get your visa and you're in Australia, while you are working, you can continue to take steps, whether that will be extra study or you need to pass exams to have your skills recognized in Australia. You can continue to work towards getting your skills assessed and getting your registration. Once you get your skills assessed and you get your registration, you can start working as a doctor. This can take you 1 or 2 years or more, depending on how well you manage to pass all the exams and how much of your study was recognized in the past. Now, I'm speaking in general terms because recognizing your study and your qualifications is very, very individual, because again, as I said, depends on your profession. There's many different types of medical professionals. Depends on how much time you spent in university, which university you have studied in, and if you have international experience. All of these things are a factor in determining how much time you need to study in Australia so you can get your skills recognized. Sometimes you might have a provisional recognition where you can work as a doctor, but you need to work in a hospital and you need to be supervised for a certain amount of time. Okay, so those things are quite complicated. Overall, my specialization, I'm a visa migration agent. So I specialize in the visa requirements, in the legislation, Australian visa legislation. I can help to guide you to get your skills assessments and to get your registrations. However, my main task is to help you find the correct visa or the correct pathway to come to Australia. Okay. So having said this, giving you this information, you can see there's multiple pathways and multiple options for doctors. you might be able to get 1 of 4 different types or even 5 different types of permanent visas. And if you're not able to get one of those because either you don't have enough English results, your English results are not high enough, or because you don't have enough work experience, or your particular university is not recognized, you can still make it to Australia, work in the medical profession, although at a much lower level. And while you're working in Australia, you can work towards getting your skills assessed and start working as a doctor. So people have done this in the past. It's possible, but it's just going to take longer. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to start focusing on some of the questions, but I think most of the questions are in Uzbek. Shahzada, can you have a look at the questions in the chat, and can you ask people, or maybe you yourself can type in some of the questions, but type
Yes,
them maybe in English.
Let's start with the questions which they have sent me before while registering.
Okay.
Okay, let me start. Okay, this person working in Japan as a nursing home, and she's learning English. What kind of requirements to get this work visa for the nurses? And is there age limits?
Okay, that's actually very good. So people who are working in Japan or Korea, especially in the nurse field, have a benefit. I'm not sure about this particular person's circumstances. However, if you have a nursing qualifications from Japan, you can sit an exam in Australia and you can get your skills assessment and become a registered nurse in Australia. If you become a registered nurse in Australia, you can get permanent residency. Yeah, again, it's very similar to doctors. You have many options because nurses are in demand. Age limit, usually 45 years of age. The age limit is for most of the visas. However, if you're willing to work in a regional area, not in a big city, I can find a pathway for you through different visas, and you still may be able to get permanent visa up to the age of 55. Okay, this is not for everyone though. This is for certain professions, and it's for certain areas that you have to be willing to live there for 5 years or more, but you can get a permanent visa. There's a lot of Japanese, so I have a lot of Japanese clients, and a lot of Japanese nurses are applying for visas to Australia. As long as you have the skills assessment, you can do it. If you don't get the skills assessment, the thing that I just showed you for the aged care, if you're willing to work as an assistant nurse, right? You can either work age disability care or personal care, or a nursing support worker. If you're a nursing support worker, it's easier to get your skills assessment, much easier to get your skills assessment. You need less English, and you're going to get the visa quicker. The minus is you're going to get less money for your wages. So it's possible.
Thank you. Another question. Hello, I'm doctor. I recently came to USA. I'm trying to find a job because he's already doctor. If I'm not mistaken, he was X-ray or the doctor who was checking the body. My daughter is also graduating from a Russian medical institute. Which websites can I use to find a job?
So for Australia, unless you have your skills assessment and you have your recognition, so you are able to work as a doctor, you need to have a look at this here. Websites are not going to help you. You cannot get a job in Australia unless you have the required skills recognized and the required registration. So for that reason, I mean, you can look for jobs, but this is the first step. The first step is having your skills recognized in Australia and getting registered in Australia. Without those things, it's very, very difficult, close to impossible. No one's going to hire you if you want to work as a doctor. You can go at a lower level, might be possible, but as a doctor, no. Best probably website to look would be seek.com.au. Seek.com.au. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. What about your daughter? She's graduating just the university, medical university. She's a future doctor.
It's the same pathway. regardless of what country you are coming from, you still have to go through the same pathway. You need to check if your university and your studies and your the country you studied in will be recognized in Australia. I'm giving you the websites, the starting points. I'm giving you the starting points with those two websites where you would be able to find information on the requirements and on the steps you need to take to get yourself a skills assessment and to get yourself recognition in Australia, registration. If you need me to look at your individual case, I can help you to show you, okay, you need to check this, you need to check that, you need to do this, you need to do that. I can also check if your university has been recognized in Australia. I have access to a special database, right? That will tell me if a particular university is recognized in Australia. However, just because the university is recognized doesn't mean you get the skills assessment, because it also means that your experience and your subjects and your profession are also taken into account. So if you need individual help, please speak to Sheikh Zoda and we can book a consultation, right? I cannot answer individual, specifically individual questions because I don't know anything about you and we don't have enough time. I can give you just the guides at the moment. I can tell, okay, you can find information from this side. You can find information from this side. If you have those things, then I can help you with the visa. I can tell you, okay, this visa is better for you. I can help you prepare the documents. I can help you find a job potentially because there's a lot of work at the moment in the medical field. I have contacts who are hiring nurses, who are hiring doctors, but I can't answer individual specific questions at the moment.
One more question. Hello, I'm anesthesiologist, reanimatologist. I speak English. I would like to work in Australia. Could you give me some more information? Is it required to have a CVE? What are the requirements? Will they recognize Uzbek diploma? Tashkent Medical Academy.
Again, this is a very individual question. I don't know anything about this person. The process of getting your diploma and your skills recognized is very long and very complicated. It could take 6 or more months for you to get your answer back if they've recognized and what they've recognized for your studies. If they don't recognize it, you still have the option of coming to Australia either on a student visa or on the visa that I showed you before, working at a lower level. While you're working at this lower level, you can do your studies and sit for exams to get yourself to a level where your degree will be recognized. This is a very complicated question, right? So I cannot answer it. I can just point you out to the information, and then if you need any more information, I can help you individually, and we'll have a look at your case during a consultation. Otherwise, you need to have a look at these websites that I've shown you. This is the first site, health.gov.au, and the second website is medicalboard.gov.au. Those are the two websites that you have to start off with.
Okay.
And just I forgot to show you this at the beginning. This is again a government website, mara.gov.au. This is my registration. So this gives me permission, gives me license to help people get visas, to apply for visas, to manage the immigration for Australia. Because there's a lot of people that are trying to do visas, but they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the expertise, they haven't studied migration law. So this here, if you go to this website, you can check if a person is eligible and able and allowed to provide immigration assistance. Sorry, Sheikh Zoda, go. Next question.
Hello, I know an obstetrician gynecologist who has 7 years of experience and graduated with honors. English is intermediate level, and she wants to immigrate to Australia, and she would like to know the work permit, and this person is 35, 36 years old. He knows English. He has a master's degree also.
Sorry, they want to know the what payment?
The age they want to know, and
I've already said that 45 is usually, but we can sometimes do up to 55, depending on the location where they live and which pathway they choose.
And in general, can he immigrate to Australia or not? with the 8 years of experience as a doctor in Uzbekistan?
Again, it depends on skills assessment and registration. So this
Okay.
is a very, very long process. They need to assess. Without assessing, I cannot. If they want to go with something easier, as I showed you before, they can use the pathway through this agreement. And that's going to be much easier and much quicker. If the main purpose is to come to Australia as soon as possible, this is a better pathway. Because you need lower English, much less skills, much easier skills assessment. The only minus on this is that you're going to get paid much less money. Right?
Okay, next question. Our family, all of our doctors, can we get our children, and how we can get a job?
If your children are under 18,
Yes.
or if your children are still dependent on you, so they're at university but they're dependent on you financially, most visas would allow you to bring them with you. So if you meet the requirements for a permanent visa, even for a work visa, you can bring your family with you. So if one person gets the visa, everyone else in the family will get the visa, as long as they meet the requirements. What was the other question? How do you get a job?
Yes.
Look, there are websites. I mentioned one of the websites, which was seek.com.au. However, I also have contacts with people that recruit medical personnel, whether they'll be nurses or doctors. As long as you meet the requirements and you manage to come to Australia, I can give you directions.
Okay, one more question. It is not so connected. However, I would like to read it. I am currently on a Bridge A visa. I have 48 bars. So can I change to Bridge B and apply for 482 visa from outside Australia? I have qualifications. I also
Okay,
have a
okay.
job.
Stop,
I
stop,
work
stop,
with the
stop,
field
stop,
of
stop,
painting.
stop, stop. This is not related at all for this discussion.
Okay.
Section 48 bar may be lifted even while in Australia, depending on what visa you want to apply for. However, I don't know anything about you, so I cannot answer that question. So once you get section 48 bar, you complicate things a lot. It may be possible to go offshore, but you need to play little tricks. Yeah. So if you're interested for me to look at your case, please speak to Shakzoda and or put a message, and then you need to book a consultation. I need to assess you.
Okay, I'm a dentist. I would like to know the requirements to get a job and to migrate.
So dentistry is a little bit different to the rest of the medical fields. I don't even know which organization assesses dentists, and I'm not sure which list it's in. So if you're a dental specialist, you need to look at this organization here. Again, they have their own requirements, which are different to the medical requirements. But once you get your skills assessments and you get your registration, the pathway to migrate is very similar to what we just covered. But we don't have enough time to go into details about each visa, because there's multiple visa pathways and different pathways might be applicable to different people. So for dentistry, again, I can help you individually because it's different to the medical field. But the concept is very similar: skills assessment, registration, permission to work, and then we go for the visa after that.
Okay, the last question. There is a doctor working as a physician in Uzbekistan, but he would like to work as a physician in Australia. And what kind of visas it is possible to choose? Average
Which already
salary
showed.
for a year, average salary for physicians, and average amount of money for immigration and living costs in a month in Australia.
Okay, so I cannot answer the average living cost because it depends on what city you live in, where you live in. If you live in Sydney, maybe average living cost, if you want to live in a good place by yourself, maybe $1,000 a week. But if you want to live with your family, it might be $1,500 a week. Your wages as a doctor depends on what kind of a doctor, depends on the work experience, depends on so many different things. But physician, was that a general practitioner?
Yes.
Let's see what it says here. 157 per hour is your general average fee. Okay. So some of them are 166, roughly around 150 something dollars per hour. So some people do 12-hour shifts in one day, I don't know, $1,800 or more.
Thank you. Now let's look at the checks because chat, some people started asking questions in English.
Okay, can you read the question so you can follow it?
Yes, of course. Так. Can I work in Australia with USMLE Step 1?
I do not know what that is. I don't know what USMLE is. Can you explain more?
Next question.
No, can you ask him to explain what this means? What is USMLE?
Так, Тимурбек Мурзаков. Could you please explain about your question?
No. United States medical, no. You need Australian licensing. That's something from America. I don't know what this is. You need Australian licensing.
Okay.
So it might be, if you already hold United States medical license, it might be easier for you to obtain one in Australia, but just by having this, you cannot work in Australia. Possibly you could have a pathway where you're studying here and doing the exams to get the Australian license, and you could be supervised while doing that, but to work as a proper doctor on your own without supervision with this is not possible.
Next question. My sister is 36 years old. She has graduated Tashkent Medical Academy in the faculty gynecology. She has more than 5 years experience, professional experience, and in Uzbekistan, and learning knows the English language like intermediate level.
Okay,
Can she apply
Shahzada,
for the
I
permanent?
have to stop you. Again, this is a very specific question to this particular person's case, and the information that is being provided is not enough for an assessment to be made. So these individual questions cannot be reviewed. If a person wants to find out the information on their own, they need to visit those two websites, this site here and this site here. This is the beginning of the registration process. If they want to try to get registration while they're in Uzbekistan or another country, I can help them with the visa if they have this registration. If they need help, if they want to speak to me individually, I need to ask them a lot of questions. We're going to go through the lists, and then I can give them pointers and tell them, you need to do this, you need to do this. If then they get their skills assessment and they get their registration, then I can help them and I can tell them, yes, you can come, no, you cannot come, depending on what happens with those two registrations and assessments. If they don't want to do these assessments because they're expensive or because it takes time, then the only option they have is to come on the labor agreement that I was showing you. And while they're working in Australia, they can do these assessments and these registrations and then start working as a doctor. Before that, they'll be working at a different profession. So unless I have an individual consultation to give the people pointers, well, you can do this, you can do this, I cannot answer these questions. And even then, I will not be able to answer the question fully, because the assessment needs to be made by those two organizations. And after this assessment is made, they will have a yes or a no. And based on if it's a no, they can still do a bridging course or exam to get this registration or to get this license. Okay. So you have licensing, registration. Once you have those, we have the visa framework. I can help you with the visa framework, but there's many visas and we need to find what is suitable for you, your particular situation.
Next question, can I use a language course? It means, first of all, apply to the language course. I am a doctor or nurse, and then change the visa.
This is possible, but there's one very big but. Your course has to be related to what you have studied or what you're working. So if you're coming to Australia to do a language course, you need to be doing medical English. Shahzoda can help you to find a medical English course. That's the first thing. Second thing is, your intentions to come to study in Australia have to be for you to come to be genuinely temporary entrant, meaning you come to study, you intend to study and then go back. But if you are already in Australia on a student visa, and then you find an employer, or you get your skills assessed, and then you decide that you want to study in Australia, this is possible. Yeah, so you have to decide that you want to stay in Australia to do further studies or to do some sort of qualification recognition, skills assessments, or to work, or to apply for a permanent visa after you have already arrived in Australia. Because if you already have the intention to come to study and afterwards to apply for a visa, whatever visa that is, anything other than a student visa, you may get refused the student visa. So overall, yes, it's possible. And people do this. People come, they do exams so they can so their skills are assessed. And after those exams, if they find a job, whether they're being supervised or not, they apply for a work visa or a permanent visa. So it's possible, yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any qualification exams in Australia for doctors that must be taken?
Yes, you have to look at those two websites that I've shown you.
Thank you. I have studied in Ukraine dentistry and have worked there for several years as an orthodontist. Now I'm working in Uzbekistan. Is there a pathway to work as a dentist in Australia? What are the chances and do I need to take the qualification exam?
Again, dentistry is different from the medicine doctors and nurses. I already showed a link, which I don't remember where this link is now, which has the skills assessing body for dentistry, this one here, right? So dental specialist. So you need to have a look at the requirements on this particular skills assessing body. I am not really covering dentistry at the moment, but we can have a look at it in more detail if you're interested. This is the organization, Australian Dental Council. Okay. The visa pathway, as long as you get your skills assessed and you get your recognition, the visa pathway will be the same. Usually, actually, before I say that, 1 second, I take that back because I did not check which list this is in. There's different lists. Give me 1 second. Okay, no. So as a dentist, we need to look at a different pathway for you. Sorry, we don't have time to cover dentist in this meeting because doctors and nurses are in this list here, which is the best list at the moment. So if we scroll down, we have, so where are the doctors of medical oncologists, cardiologists. So you have all these medical professions here, but dentist is in this list over here. So you can use different visas. Some of the visas that are applicable to doctors, or some of the visas that doctors can use to get a permanent residency, are not available to dentists. However, it's still possible for a dentist to get a permanent visa, or it may be possible. Sorry, it may be possible. I need to look at your case individually. Sorry, this is a little bit different.
Okay, next question. Recently, I have graduated bachelor degree, as in medical bachelor degree, and this person has IELTS 6. How he or she can find a job, and can he carry on his studying there?
In Australia?
Yes.
So yes, it's possible for you to study in Australia as long as you meet the requirements, but studying to be a doctor is very expensive here. Very expensive. So finding a job, I mean, if you're willing to work as a nurse support worker, there's a lot of work. And I mean, you can either look for agencies to recruit you from overseas, or potentially I can assist you to find a job. The only problem is that if you're in Uzbekistan, it's going to be difficult for them to test your ability. So you might want to come here to study, to improve your English, and then start working. And when you start working, you'll be making enough money, then you can go study to finish off your medical degree or to study extra. So that's a possibility.
Thank you. Next question. Any information regarding sonographer? Because sonographer registered as an allied healthcare workers in the most Europe countries, including United Kingdom.
Sonographer, no idea.
Sonographer. GR.
Let me see. Let me see. So again, this profession is a different skills assessing body. So it's not really part of our presentation now. It's in the good list. It's in the good list, so that's a positive. But we haven't really prepared for this particular profession. Yeah. So this here is the organization that will do your skills assessment. So you need to do a search, and we'll take it from there.
Next question is, this person asked second time, any information regarding sonography, because sonography registered as an allied healthcare workers in the most Europe countries, including
This is the information
any
here.
information?
Let's see, that's all. This is it. Sonographer here. You have to look at the skills assessment. If he needs me to help him additionally in terms of how to approach the skills assessment, how to approach the registration, I can do this. But again, each person will have an individual case, depending on where they've studied, what they've studied, how long they've studied, what their work experience is, where they worked, and also, I mean, their individual circumstances. So I can mainly help them with the visas, and I can guide them through this, but he'll need to book a consultation for me to speak to him individually.
Okay, next question. Can I take my spouse if I apply for temporary skilled worker visa?
Yes.
Good.
As long as you have the documentation to prove that this is your spouse, yes, you can. 100% you can. You can bring your spouse, you can bring your children, as long as they are dependent, no problem.
Let's read another question. Thank you for your recommendation. My name is Bilal and I'm 30 years old. I'm a medical doctor with specialty general practitioner obtained in Ukraine. You said that most easy pathway is aged care industry. Can work in this industry with my diploma?
So for this agreement, the one that I'm referring to with the aged care labor agreement, the agreement hasn't been enacted yet. It's going to start from 1st of July, most likely. Once the agreement is enacted, there's going to be different organizations that will be, depending if you want to be a nurse support worker, you want to be an aged care worker, depends on what you want to do, right? So the skilled assessing bodies would be these ones here. This is one assessing body, and this is another assessing body. They haven't, last time I checked last week, they hadn't published the requirements yet. However, the requirements are going to be very low, because if you look at what is written over here, where was it? You only need 12 months of work experience or a certificate 3, which is between 3 to 12 months of study. So usually it will be very easy for you to get this recognition. But at the moment, I cannot tell you the exact specifics until next month.
Okay.
Most likely.
Can you help to get a job offer in this industry? It means like nurses, aged care people.
So I can help you. I cannot guarantee. I can't take money to find your job. I'm not allowed to do that. But I know people who are recruiters or HR personnel in aged care organizations and nursing homes and healthcare facilities. I can call them and ask them, do you have any available positions? I have a client. I can forward your CV, your experience, but then it's up to them if they hire you or not. I cannot guarantee you a job, but I can help you look for a job. But ultimately, it's up to the actual individual institution if they'll hire you or not.
Okay, thank you very much.
Maybe one more question, and one more question we have to finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question.
Mhm.
Can people work as a physical chemistry? It means biological chemistry in the laboratory. Is there some jobs? For example, in Uzbekistan, person worked in the laboratory, specialized laboratory, to check, for example, blood and other things.
Okay. Is the person asking if it's possible to get a permanent residency through this pathway or
Work visa.
Work visa? Can they tell me exactly what is the name of the profession?
Name of the profession.
So there's too many professions. I'm not really sure what.
Physiochemistry.
No, this
Or
it's not the same.
biological chemistries.
It's not the same in Australia. Maybe this thing here. Yeah, blood. This one here.
Yes,
That's the one. So this is a medical technician. In Australia, it's called a medical technician. There's other occupations which are similar, that are related. But anyway, there's something here about blood collection. See? So that profession is this profession here. Medical laboratory technician. Let's see what part of the list this is on. Shortlist. So yeah, it is possible to get a work visa as long as your skills are assessed. In terms of permanent, it may be possible for a permanent visa as well. However, because it's on a different list from the medical professions, from the doctors and nurses, this person will not be able to apply for the same visas as a doctor or nurse. And it's also different from the labor agreement that we looked at. This is the organization that does the skills assessment. No, that's not in Australian. That's this one here. But again, you need to have a look at the individual requirements for a particular job. So here, medical laboratory scientist, and you have specializations as well. So you have to be careful which one you specialize in, because it needs to meet the requirements for the visa. So as long as you meet the visa requirements and you meet the skills assessing requirements, and then I'm not even sure for this profession if you need a registration. I do not know. I haven't dealt with this profession before, so I'm not sure. But as long as you meet the requirements from the skills assessment side, if you need to get a registration, if you get it, I can help you with the visa after that. But for the assessment, I don't know anything about this profession.
Okay, thank you very much for your reply, all the questions. Now
Yeah,
let's
thank you.
finish.
We have to finish. I want to thank you everyone for joining the seminar. I hope that you got some information that will be of use to you. And I hope to see you again soon.
Qanaqadir yana savolingiz bo'lsa, iltimos menga yozishingiz mumkin, yokida Visa Helper Telegram kanaliga, yokida Instagram kanalimiz ham bor. Chatga hozir yozib yuboraman. Yokida telefon raqamimizga qilib savolinglarni bersanglar bo'ladi. Shu telefon raqamida Telegram ham bor. Savolinglarni o'zingizga qulay vaqtda qoldiringlar. Javob berishga harakat qilamiz. Va yana ham detalni aniqlash kerak bo'lsa, unda individual konsultatsiyaga yozilishingiz to'g'ri keladi. Hammanglar vaqt ajratib kirganinglar uchun katta rahmat. Sog' salomat bo'linglar.
Sizga ham rahmat Shahnoz opa, vaqt ajratganingizga, tashkillashtirganingizga, juda ham foydali ma'lumotlarni oldik. Sizga alohida bog'lanaman, xudo xolasa. Kattakon rahmat.
Xo'p, sog' bo'ling. Qo'ldan kelgancha hamma savollarga javob berishga harakat qilamiz. Yana shu meditsina sohasida vebinarlar bo'lishini xohlasanglar, chatga yozsanglar, обязательно biz organizovat qilamiz. Katta rahmat
Xo'p, rahmat.
hammanglarga. Sog' bo'linglar.